Alright, you bunch of weirdos, we need to talk. Like, seriously, because way too many artists out there are still working for free, and it's just stupid. If you've been around the artist world for longer than 5 minutes, you've probably already heard this. Can you just make a quick logo for me? Or it'll be great exposure. Or perhaps I don't really have a budget, but I'll give you a shout out on Insta. My personal favorite, though, is absolutely, you should be grateful for the opportunity. Like, alright? And you know what? It's not an opportunity. It's called extortion. That's just the short of it. And if you've ever been guilt-tripped into doing work for free, I get it. I really do. I've been there myself. Many times. More often than I am willing to admit, which is why I'm actually making this video. But there is a truth in here. Every time we say yes to do free work, an artist fairy died somewhere. No, seriously. Every time an artist decides to do work for free, it makes it a little bit harder for other artists to be taken seriously, really. To be respected and to actually make a living. And especially today, in the world where we are constantly confronted with this flood of AI slop, we cannot really afford to undervalue ourselves. If we don't give our market its due diligence, if we don't set boundaries, and if we don't demand fair compensation, we are going to lose that very little space we still have to make a living as creatives. So today I want to take a deep dive into all of this. I want to talk about contracts, about working on commission, pricing, what makes a good client, because all of this is important, and all of this is really not necessarily even about the money, but about protecting our craft, our market, and most of all, our future as creatives. Before we dive in though, some quick housekeeping. If you do like art videos or tutorials, please do give this video a thumbs up. And if you like my work in general, a sub to the channel would really help. It'll really tell the algorithm gods to help push this video forward so more artists can see this, and so, you know, we can spread the word and creativity all together. Quick shout out to my patrons. Thank you all so much, guys. You are amazing and you are rocking this. Currently we have about 30 people on there. They are getting early access to a lot of these butcher shop videos, but they'll also get some really exclusive art merch 4 times a year, which is actually pretty damn cool. Go check it out, patreon.com/sandybutchers. But for now, welcome back to another butcher shop. Alright, so for this video, I chose to use footage from a work in progress piece that I was actually commissioned for way back in 2024 for a local convention here in the Netherlands. So while I toil away at the October banner of Fantasy Fest, let's chat about what working as an artist actually means. Because let's say you're about to take on a commission. Maybe it's a portrait, or maybe it's a logo, or some massive illustration. Whatever it is, there are a few things you always want to keep in mind before you say yes. This first bit is just a quick overview of things that should stay on your radar, but we'll dive deeper into the subject matter after this. So if you want to skip this part, go ahead, use the chapters to find a subject that matters to you. First of all, let's look at the scope of the project. What exactly is your client asking for? Is it just one piece? Or is it a series? Or are they expecting you to provide sketches, revisions, or even source files at the end? Make sure you know what's being asked of you, in writing, preferably, before you agree to anything. To give you an example, all throughout 2024 and part of 2025, I was brought on board for the design of a brand new card game called Imminent Peril. So me and my buddy MK Gibson, whom you may know of some of his books, we were brought in to do the art direction and most of the design for the general branding and the design of the playing cards themselves. This was actually the first time I worked on such a big project, and when we basically got a carte blanche at the start of the project, that sounded incredible. But over time, as more and more revisions were requested, it appeared that some of the things we worked on could and should have been thought of way earlier. Now, don't get me wrong, I absolutely loved working on this game, and the folks behind it are absolutely amazing. But because there were so few guidelines, it was sometimes very difficult to plow through and find out what the exact expectations were. So fast forward to today, every time before I accept a commission, I remind myself of the importance of preset guidelines and expectations. Now, once you've settled on expectations and scope, be sure to double check on the timeline. When does the client expect the work to be done? And be honest with yourself. Can you actually meet that deadline? Don't say yes to a 2-week turnaround if you know it's going to take you at least 6. It's better to under-promise and over-deliver than the other way around. Which reminds me, this should have been a one-liner in Justin Truman's speech about over-delivery all the way back in 23. But anyway, I digress. Another thing to keep in mind before agreeing to or rejecting a commission is usage. This is actually a big one. Where is your art going to be used? Personal commissions like a gift or a tattoo design maybe, they're one thing. But if a company wants to use your art on a product they're going to sell, that's a commercial project and it should be priced accordingly. Don't let anyone trick you into just a quick sketch if it's going to end up on their $1 million ad campaign. Finally, let's talk about payment. Always, and I do mean always, get a deposit upfront. Even if it's just 25 or 30%, it protects you from clients that ghost. If someone refuses to pay a deposit, it's a giant red flag. Get out.
Get to the chopper!
Think of working on commissions like building a house. You wouldn't hire a builder and then say, oh, well, yeah, you know what? You just build the house, and if I like it, I will pay you. No. You'd put down a deposit, sign a contract, and agree on the terms. Treat your art the same way. Alright, now that's all settled in, let's talk about the scary bit. Pricing your work. And here's the truth, there is no one-size-fits-all formula. Pricing your art really depends on a mix of factors. Your skill level, your value of time, the materials you're using, and sometimes even the size or complexity of the piece. One approach is time-based pricing. I know this is different in every country in terms of minimum wage, but figure out your hourly rate. What's the minimum you need to make your time worth it? Or if you're leaning more towards making a living of your art, then I do encourage you to think in terms of, will this hourly rate allow me to get my groceries this month? or this week. You know what I mean, right? Then estimate how long the project will take and multiply it out. That's simple, right? The trick really is being realistic about how long things actually take. If you think you'll finish in 10 hours, maybe budget for 12. And this is a bit of an unwritten rule about this, especially, working as a freelancer, but I do try to stay transparent about this, at least to myself. But I always suggest calculating at least between 10 and 20% extra time. That way you won't be fighting an uphill battle with your deadlines. Now, this is possible when you work on personal commissions. Very often when you work for a company, this does not go, sadly. Then again, another option would be not to charge per hour, which sounds weird, so stick with me here. But you will charge based on the physical size of your work. Obviously, for digital art, this doesn't really work. But if you make a physical product, listen to this. When I went to art school, way back when the dinosaurs still roamed the earth, one of my teachers taught me a trick for this. One that's based on how they actually do things in the art gallery world, or at least back then. I am not quite sure if this is still the standard, but it sounds super logical, and I've been using this method for a very long time, and it works. It's actually pretty simple. You take the width of your work in centimeters. Now, all my American buddies, this means you're gonna have to use a converter. So the width of your work in centimeters, and then you add the length of your work in centimeters, and you multiply that number with your status. Now, I hear you ask, but what is the status? I will explain this to you. This kind of is the cheeky part, because how can you figure out your status? It's very subjective, as most things actually are when it comes to art. But the guideline I was given was, your status is 2 when you're a student, a 3 when you just graduated, and that number will be going up from there. So the more famous you are, the higher the status number you can use. For example, I currently use status 4 or 5 depending on my client. Obviously, it's a bigger number for companies. I often use 5, I've sometimes used 6 even for that. But for individuals, I usually tend to go for status 4. And the great thing about this method is that you maintain a very consistent price across the board. It'll cover your expenses, and it'll usually also allow for a fair hourly rate. And again, here's where I really want to emphasize to not undersell yourself just because you are not that experienced or you just rolled out of school or anything like that. Don't feel bad about asking for money. Your time has value. Your skills have value too. Even if you're still learning, which we all are because you are never done learning how to be an artist, you still deserve to be compensated for the effort and materials you put into this. Think about it for a second. Nobody has ever walked into a restaurant saying, "Oh, you're a new chef, right? All right, I will pay you half of the price for this food, okay?" Because that's not how this works. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for charging money, period. Alright, let's talk about contracts for a bit. Because you've got your pricing down, which is great, but contracts are very much a part of that process, really. I know contracts sound boring and scary, but trust me when I say that a simple contract will save you from so many headaches. It doesn't have to be 10 pages long or written in lawyer speak. It just needs to outline some key details. What I usually include in my contract are the following bits. Who is your client? What are you expected to create? How much are you charging? When are your payments due? What rights does the client have to the finished piece? So can they use it publicly? Can they just use it once? Do they have a permanent license, etc.? And what happens if either of you doesn't hold up your end of the deal? And that's it. Really, it can be one page. The important thing is that you both sign it and that you both know what is being expected. Here's the thing. A contract protects both sides. It's not just about protecting you from shady clients. It also gives your client peace of mind that they're going to get what they paid for. It makes you look professional, and it sets the tone that this is a serious business arrangement, not just a casual favor or some other bad excuse or bad title that you can give to any piece of art. If a client refuses to sign a contract, just walk away. Please do yourself that favor. Owe that to yourself. No contract is no job, is no creation, no art. That's not someone you want to work with. Oh, I forgot something very important. Revisions. Revisions belong in a contract. It's the double-edged sword of commissions, because on one hand, you want your client to be happy with the final piece. On the other hand, you don't want to spend the rest of eternity making endless tweaks because they, quote unquote, just had one more idea. People among you who've worked on commission before sadly know exactly what I'm talking about. And this is again where the contract comes in. Always, and I do mean always, set a limit on revisions. For example, you might include 3 rounds of revisions in your base price. This is what I usually do in my contracts. Anything beyond that will either cost extra, or depending on your schedule, is simply an entirely new arrangement all by itself. You might have to reschedule that bit of the commission then. Now, the number of revisions you allow might depend on whether you're working with an individual or with a company. Individuals might need a little more hand-holding, especially if it's their first time commissioning art. I've worked with many clients who started to show early signs of revision madness, and for each change, I kindly reminded them of how many revisions they still had left. So I would talk with them about the pros and cons of the idea that they had. So we would actually schedule in a phone call and go over, their ideas. I would try to make them imagine or, make them visualize the result of the change they wanted to suggest. And then I would ask them to consider if that change is worth giving up another one of their revisions. I really try to make this as tangible as possible. Basically, I'm giving them 3 carrots, and every time they ask me to change something, I take away one of their carrots. It really trying to make it that visual for them, because again, individual people often are baffled by your art, which is insanely cool, but they don't necessarily understand the business part of commissioning an artist. So be strict on that for yourself. If they do, think giving up a revision for their idea, that's perfectly cool. Get to work. If they don't think it is actually worth it, then that's also cool. It just means they will have to trust their artist. And trust is also something that is very important when you're working on commission, and it ultimately goes both ways. If the client does not trust their artist to get something good by the end of the project, it really, really destroys the working balance and your working relationship. And often, it won't do the final product any good either. So if you're an artist and you don't trust your client, I mean, do the math. Either way you turn it, trust is very important, which is why contracts are important. See where I'm going with this? See where I'm going with this? Good. Companies, on the other hand, usually know what they want. When they don't, it can spiral into a nightmare of endless committee feedback, which is, 10 out of 10 do not recommend. The trick, again, is to set your boundaries early. Be clear about how your revisions work and structure them, and explain to them when they happen in the process and how many of them are included. Don't wait until you're 50 hours in and the client suddenly decides they want the entire color scheme changed. Don't do that to yourself. And this, my dear viewers, kind of takes me into the next subject. What makes a good client or customer? You can already tell at this point in my speech that the client is becoming more and more important in all of this. So let's flip the script for a minute and ask ourselves what makes a good customer. Because trust me, they do exist. And when you find them, they are worth their weight in gold. A good customer respects your time and your process. They come prepared with references, examples, or maybe even a mood board of what they're looking for. They don't expect you to read their mind. They will give you the tools to understand their vision. Although, that all being said, a little bit of mind reading is of course part of the artistic magic at work. If I do an intake, or I should basically say when I do an intake, because I always do an intake with any potential client, and during that conversation, if I feel good about where things are going, but they don't have any visual cues yet, I give them homework. I ask them to make a mood board and find examples of something they like, or styles, or setups, or compositions, etc. Ironically though, this often means, I laugh only not to cry, that they come back with AI generated poop, which I then have to stare at, and my eyes are still bleeding. It's awful, but it's something, right? I applaud them and love them for the fact that they come to a real artist to work on their project, so I guess I can forgive them for that much. But a good customer communicates clearly. They respond to your emails or whatever communication platform you agree to use. I personally invite my clients into my Discord server with private channels, so that we have separate locations for brainstorms, that we have a specific place where we can find and read the contracts. We have a sort of open chat a channel where clients can dump their questions, or even like a feedback channel. So it's very, very structured, and it just makes communication so much clearer and easier. It all really depends on, your personal preference there. Feedback is very important in that bit, by the way. You want their feedback to not be super vague, like, well, make it pop. Or again, they should trust you as the artist to make creative decisions, but there are limits to that. You don't want a client to just come up to you and say, well, make it beautiful, or like I just said, like, make it pop. You want them to guide the vision of what they need. And it's your job to translate that vision into an image. But to just be, free and off any hook, usually I don't personally find it working all that well. I like clients who come in with some form of idea of what they want. But again, this is where the trust bit comes in. And also, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you as the artist don't have work to do here. Of course you ask questions, and of course you want to guide your client the best way that you can. But what I mean to say is that when you ask your questions, they should come with solid answers. So if you keep prodding and asking and you're trying to get anything out of them, but all you get is just make it look good, abandon ship. This is also a process I've noticed. It takes time for you to learn which questions to ask. It is very tempting to just chat with them, and if the personality is cool and you as people match, it's very tempting to just get off track and chat about the weather. For my part, teach yourself what questions help me the most, and I think that's different for everybody because our visual brains sometimes require different input, to get kickstarted. So make a list for yourself. What do you need to know? And start asking those questions. And it can all be very conversational, perfectly fine. Just make sure you get the info that you need. Alright, let's wrap this up because I've been on about this for quite a while now. Thank you so much for staying on board if you made it this far. Here's the bottom line of what I try to explain. Artists should never work for free. Not because we're greedy or that we're necessarily looking for a lot of money, but because our work does have value. And if we give it away without that value, we also devalue ourselves, and we also devalue the entire creative community. Working on commission can be an absolutely amazing experience, but only if you protect yourself with clear pricing, solid contracts, defined revision limits, and open communication. Find the good clients, the ones who respect you and come prepared, and don't be afraid to walk away from the ones who don't. You'll be surprised how many good clients there actually are out there. It's rare that you come across, multiple people in a row that make an absolute mess out of things. So in this video, I was not trying to scare you away from working on commission. I just want you to be cautious. Because at the end of the day, your art is your labor, and your labor has value. So you deserve to be paid for it. If you found this video helpful, please hit that like button. Subscribe maybe, and perhaps you even want to share it with an artist friend who also might need to hear this. And again, a massive thank you to my Patreon supporters. You are all the reason that I can keep making videos like this. So if you want to join this community, You'll find the link below in the video description. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. And as always, keep creating, keep experimenting, and keep demanding the respect your work deserves, weirdo.